Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee. I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold exploration today. We will hear from Matthew Lennox King, the CEO of Contact Gold Corp. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this Contact Gold webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the Contact corporate presentation. That can be found on the company's website, contactgold.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Contact Gold. So we have Contact Gold presenting today. The company has a portfolio of projects in Nevada. This includes both the Pony Creek project located next to the South Railroad project recently acquired by Orla Mining, as well as the Green Springs project located at the southern end of Nevada's prolific Carlin Trend. With that, I now turn over to Matt to update our audience on the company.
Great, thanks very much, Tim. Pleasure to be here with you guys for another Red Cloud webinar. As Tim said, and as I'm sure many of you do know, Contact Gold is focused on gold exploration in the prolific Great Basin of Nevada. We're Vancouver-based, and we trade in Canada on the Venture Exchange, symbol C, in the US on the OTCQB, symbol CGOLF. And as we come in, of course, we have our forward-looking statements as referenced by Tim, which brings us to Contact Gold and our projects. So we are Nevada focused. We have been for the duration of our existence, which is approximately 5 years. We are focused on Nevada's major gold producing trends. On the Carlin Trend, we have Pony Creek, which is an established resource stage gold project. And then at the southern end of the Cortez Trend, we have Green Springs. So this is, again, an established high-grade oxide gold project adjacent to Calibre Mining and their Gold Rock development project and producing Pan Mine. Our focus at Contact has been always on high-quality projects, science-based exploration, and really focusing on creating value at the project level. At Green Springs and Pony this year, our focus has been on growth. At Green Springs, we drilled a step-out program. We produced excellent high-grade oxide results, arguably some of the best results to come out of Nevada this year, led by nearly 2 grams over 41 meters, starting at surface, all oxide, and wide open for expansion. At Pony Creek earlier this year, we released a first-time resource of 433,000 pit-constrained gold ounces at an average grade of 0.52, and that remains wide open for expansion, both through incremental step outs and more aggressive discovery style drilling. We'll start off at Green Springs. So we are down here at the southern end of that prolific Cortez Trend. We actually sit 7 kilometers east of Calibre and their Gold Rock development project, a little bit further from their Pan Mine. And what we're doing at Green Springs, the rocks we're exploring, making our discoveries in, are the very same rocks that we see at Gold Rock and Pan. So fundamentally, Green Springs is a high-grade, oxidized Carlin-type gold system. It's very shallow. The majority or all our drill holes this year were less than 100 meters from surface. And those were designed to follow up on some really exciting, really compelling discoveries that our team made in 2021. So if we look at the drill results out of X-Ray and Tango this year, again, 1.95 over 41 meters, 1.66 over nearly 29, 0.82 over 35, and so on. So these results are all much higher than or right on par with what you see at operating open pit heap leach gold mines in the great state of Nevada. We really see two opportunity sets here at Green Springs. The first, if you bear with my scribbles, is what we call the mine trend. So that's this area here, roughly 3 kilometers of strike length. It was about 2 when we took over the project. We've added about 1 kilometer of strike length, so drilled oxide gold over an additional kilometer. Remains open to the south, and we believe we should be able to stretch that out pretty much to our southern boundary. So that's the established, well understood incremental growth part of the story here at Green Springs. Where I think it gets really exciting is when we step out to the east and the north. And this is where we have new targets that have been and were developed by Contact Gold after acquiring the project, where we have the X-ray discovery zone that we've already talked about today, the Tango discovery zone, and the previously known Alpha zone. So it's really great proof of concept that we can come in with our science-based approach, generate targets, test them with the drill, and make new discoveries and chart a pathway towards gold resources. To the east, we have undrilled, compelling, what I would call look-alike targets at Whiskey and Foxtrot, where we have large strike lengths up to nearly 1 kilometer in each case. And those targets are defined by all the same elements that led us into the X-ray and Tango discoveries. So we're looking at golden rock samples, golden soil samples, the right host rocks, in this case what we call the pilot shale, geophysical signatures, and really the structural complication or preparation that we like to see ahead of stepping in with the drill. The central portion here of Green Springs, this is largely unexplored. We have started stepping in there. We've identified prospective rocks like the pilot shale and think there is really good discovery potential there for future programs. Looking at Green Springs and access, we're looking at really quite classic Nevada topography and access, where your gold occurrences or deposits are clustered along the break and slope. Here we're looking south to north up the mine trend from what we call Zulu through what we call Echo up to a new zone that we identified in last year's drilling, and finally up to our high-grade northeast oxide trend. You can see the network of roads really stretching all the way back out to Nevada Highway State 50, and of course across the valley to Pan and Gold Rock over at Caliber. So here we are, we're taking a closer look at our northeast trend, running from the northern end of the mine trend through the X-ray discovery and some of those high-grade oxide intercepts, up through Alpha, and finally up to Tango, where we've developed a footprint to date of about 250 by 500 meters. So each of these zones from X-ray, Alpha, and Tango remain wide open. There is no historic drilling or any of our own drilling constraining these. And it's our goal and our expectation that we will, or we have developed a pathway to get these two resources, and compelling resources at that. Looking at X-ray in cross-section, to date, it's quite a simple story where we have our favored pilot shale host rock. The lower, we'll call it 30%, 40% of that pilot shale is mineralized, it's high grade, and it's wide open. So quite a simple targeting model here, and we look forward to continuing to execute on that as we grow things at Green Springs. So really, Green Springs, we think it's become a very exciting, very compelling project. It is an established high-grade outcropping oxidized Carlin-type gold system. The exploration potential remains excellent, and I think we've really demonstrated that over the last 12 months, first by making the discoveries and then also demonstrating that we can continue to step out on those opportunities, continue to hit, and start to really bulk out that footprint. Certainly the address is compelling on one of Nevada's major trends, proximal to Caliber, a little bit further to I-80, a little bit further again to Kinross and their Bald Mountain mining complex. As always, we're continuing to develop new targets, continuing to map, sample, and interpret to ensure that we always have that conveyor belt of new opportunities here at Green Springs. But certainly the 3 years that we've been actively exploring at Green Springs have been very productive, have been very successful, and have delivered some of Nevada's best oxide results of the last 12 months. After Green Springs, we'll come back to the Carlin Trend. So here we're really in the heart of Nevada gold country. We're approximately, for our map here, looking at 25 kilometers south of the mining center of Elko. Relatively large city. It's where Nevada Gold Mines is based, and everything you need as far as drilling services, labs, etc., are located there. So Pony Creek that we see here down at the southern end of this 40-kilometer long belt of gold mines, deposits, and discoveries hosts 433,000 ounces between 3 deposits. That was estimated on the back of both historic drill results, of which we have all the data, but then 118 holes that we've drilled ourselves starting in 2017 with an exceptional hit rate of over 92%. So it tells us we have a robust, widespread gold system, and with the permit that we have in hand, being that plan of operations, we are able to step out and grow these resources efficiently. Really the key development in the district as it relates to Contact Gold was the recent acquisition of Gold Standard Ventures, our longtime neighbor, by Orla Mining. So they've acquired the South Railroad project, which is feasibility stage. It shows a really attractive open pit heap leach operation that will likely be Nevada's next gold mine. And over and above all the exploration potential that we see at Pony Creek, we believe the address is quite strategic given what's going on next door. Looking from the south of Pony Creek to the north, here we're getting a good view of topography and access. We're looking at the Bull Zone, which is the largest of our 3 resource areas. Coming past that, we have the Stallion Zone, second resource area. It was discovered by Contact Gold back in 2018 and is on the pathway first to resources and then resource growth beyond that. Our third resource area is Appaloosa, which is tucked in behind the hill. And then outside of that, we start to come into our large-scale undrilled exploration targets like Mustang, which has a total length of over 2 kilometers, and Elliott Dome, which sits in the very northern part of Pony Creek. Looking in a little more detail at our resource. So again, to belabor the point, 433,000 ounces at an average grade of 0.52. The overall strip ratio is quite attractive at less than 3-to-1, and that is hosted within the Bull Zone, the Appaloosa Zone, and the Stallion Zone. Here, we're looking at a Carlin type gold system as well. So our gold is in silicified and altered calcareous or limestone bearing sandstones and conglomerates based on really high hit rate and drilling here. And we do also see some intrusive hosted gold. Now, it's our view that these resources can be grown efficiently and quite rapidly as well. If we look at the map here on the right-hand side, what we're looking at in red, these are the pits that we use to constrain that gold resource. And the blue, yellows, and greens represent the block model, so the mineralized material. And it's our view and our belief that modest step-outs, incremental step-outs, can begin to capture a lot more of those blocks, bring them within the boundaries of the pit, and augment that resource number quite efficiently in the short term. It's also our view that by testing new outlying undrilled targets, like we have here at Mustang in the north and Elliott Dome in the extreme north, that we can make that next phase or wave of discovery, bring those in, define resources or deposits, define resources, and ultimately have a quite large gold endowment here at Pony Creek. In spite of the resource grade being 0.52, we do see some very high grades at Pony Creek, locally up to 20 grams per ton in unoxidized material. But more typically, our high grade oxide would be between 1 and 2.5 grams, over quite impressive thicknesses, typically around 35 to 50 meters. So everything we see here in front of us at Pony Creek is permitted under that plan of operations. It opens up all areas for both exploration and resource drilling, and that's certainly a huge advantage for Pony Creek when we look at it against other projects in the state. So Pony Creek, really in summary, it's a large-scale, near-surface, resource stage Carlin-type gold system, and that's your typical or classic Nevada type of gold system. The short-term resource growth is quite compelling, and we believe efficient, and there are those opportunities here for more large-scale discoveries to be made at Mustang and Elliott Dome. The address, again, compelling, strategic, right on the Carlin Trend and immediately south of Orla's South Railroad project. Access and logistics, again, remain excellent given our proximity to Elko. Looking at the leadership team, we all have a deep and successful history in the great state of Nevada. A number of us, myself, John Wenger, Vance Spalding, and John Dorward, were all involved in Frontier Gold, leading up to the transaction with Newmont. And then really the key individual here as far as growth and discovery is Vance Spalding, our Vice President of Exploration, a long time colleague of mine who's had discoveries both at the mid-tier and major company level through his time at Centerra and Kinross, but also with us here at Contact Gold and prior to that at Pilot Gold. Looking at our cap structure and shareholder base, we have 301 million shares outstanding. The last trade I saw prior to joining the webinar was 4 cents Canadian, giving us a market cap of approximately 12 million, or just a touch over there. We do have warrants on the books, 2 batches. The first are due to expire at the end of September in 17 days from now, and the second exist until November of 2023. We have 3 analysts who follow us. Obviously, Tim Lee here at Red Cloud, also Jordy Mark at Haywood, and Brock Coulter-John at Cormark. Looking at major shareholders, we certainly have Waterton, one of our founding shareholders, at 33%. Institutional ownership remains about 25-27%, both local Canadian institutions and some from Europe as well. And then on the insider ownership, roughly 7%. Myself, I own well over 6 million shares of the company, putting me, we'll call it about 2.5% there. So I think what really distinguishes us as a Nevada explorer is the high quality of our portfolio. Whether it's the resource stage Pony Creek project sitting on the central or southern Carlin Trend with permits in hand, that resource growth potential, both short and long term, I think that's very key. Green Springs, again, really key address on the southern end of the Cortez Trend, adjacent to Caliber. We've certainly demonstrated and continue to reinforce the high-grade oxidized nature of that Carlin-type gold system. Again, our grades and thicknesses from this year's program were really quite exceptional, with nearly 2 grams over 41 meters. So I think those are really key elements. And what we have seen in Nevada over the last 5 years is really a proliferation of new companies, but we haven't seen a proliferation or new projects being generated. So high quality projects like Pony Creek, like Green Springs, relatively rare. And I do believe that is one of the key opportunities for investors and companies in Nevada, is to focus on high quality projects owned by companies like Contact Gold. So with that, very happy to turn it back to Tim. And again, thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt, for an informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We do have a couple of questions here. Obviously, you had spoken a bit about the drilling at Green Springs in the new zones. How does the grade in these areas compare to previous drilling in other zones?
Yeah, excellent. So new zones, They're hosted in a unit called the Pilot Shale, and that Pilot Shale, it's a relatively new host rock for us at Green Springs. And what we've seen in our drilling to date is that it has tended to have moderately or slightly higher grades than what we'd seen in the previous drilling. Now that said, along the mine trend, which is hosted in a slightly younger rock unit called the Chainman Shale, we do have a zone or an area called the Echo Zone, which actually has very high grades itself. So there we're looking at 5 grams up to 5 grams over 40 meters. So that would be the one exception where we have seen previously very high grades in another zone. But as far as new areas in the Pilot Shale, those grades at X-ray have been quite exceptional.
Great. And shifting over to Pony Creek, based on what you've seen to date, how large of an extent of a target do you see, and how big do you think it could get?
Always a tricky type of question to answer, given we need to do the drilling to show the upside and demonstrate where it can get to. We are quite bullish on the potential at Pony Creek, though. We really view that 433,000 ounce number as being a starting point. We think even a modest program could likely add 50% to that, but that would be in the near term. I think longer term, looking at certainly doubling, if not tripling that resource number is probably a reasonable goal. But with the size of the property, the strength of the targets, the strength of the drill results we've been able to generate so far, that the ultimate upside, that'll be determined through drilling, but we think it'll be very attractive.
Great. And overall, what is your plan for drilling and exploration investment over the next year?
Yeah, look, ideally we're back to both those projects in the short to medium term. One of the challenges through the pandemic or the COVID times has certainly been the availability of drill rigs and drill crews. So that's always been a bit of a rate determining step on how quickly we get back there. In an ideal scenario, we would drill at least another 5,000 meters at Green Springs in the next 6 months. Similar size program at Pony Creek, that would also take us through, we think, that 50% addition but relatively efficiently as well.
Great. And when might you expect an updated resource estimate for Green Springs?
Again, great question. We're of the view that Green Springs likely needs that one more program in order to really make that resource estimate worthwhile. I think with what we see specifically at the X-ray zone or the X-ray discovery, we'd like to get another, say, 10 to 15 holes, step-out holes from that, to really start to get a better handle on both the footprint, the thickness, and prior to going to resource. But I would say it's not long out at Green Springs. It's demonstrated that it has the grade, it has the potential, and certainly that's a logical next step.
Okay, great. And then looking further forward, kind of the timeline for the project, and obviously it depends on what all you find, but when would you anticipate beginning sort of economic studies and that kind of thing for the projects?
I think in each case, you're right, it is on the earlier end to start considering that, but a few things that we routinely tackle as we advance projects, and this is true of Green Springs and Pony Creek and of projects we've collectively worked on in the past, is we're always looking at metallurgical test work. Certainly that's a key determining factor in what your economic study might ultimately look like. If the gold doesn't come out of the rock efficiently or at all, you don't have a project. We really look at permitting, so making sure that all our baseline studies, exploration permits are up to speed, and we have that relationship with the regulators, be they state or federal level. And also looking at things like availability of water, dewatering, which we don't have an issue with. So it is a bit premature, but certainly you at very least need a resource estimate in hand prior to starting to think about how you might develop the project.
Great. And then sort of strategically and longer term thinking, given that you have multiple projects and obviously some as well-established neighbors that are in the mining space, would you consider in the longer term bringing in partners or potentially looking at deals, or are you looking to evolve this, into a mining company in the long term?
I think ultimately, we are interested in creating value for our shareholders, and so that because I think you need to take a flexible and open mind to how you're going to develop your project. So part of the reason we do all the study work, the metallurgy, the permitting work, is so that the project is always kind of in the optimal space for where it is in the development pipeline. So if a major mining company came in with a compelling offer for a partnership, an earn-in, or an acquisition for one of our assets, we would certainly consider that. And if on balance it's going to make sense for our shareholders and create value, then yeah, we would certainly recommend something like that. If the path forward that looks like it's going to be the most value accretive is for Contact to develop one or more of our own assets, then we would absolutely plunge down that pathway as well.
Great. And kind of just to review, what news might we expect to have over the coming weeks and months from Contact?
Yeah, sure thing. So we will, I believe, have one more drill release out sometime in the next week, really to recap, restate, and reinforce just the amount of progress that we have had here at Green Springs. In an ideal world, we'd be looking, ideally, at the resumption of drilling and the drill results, and on from there. Of course, that's always, when you're at our stage of the development curve, it's always about how efficiently you can deploy those dollars, turn them into drill holes, turn those into drill results, and release those. So I think we should expect a fairly typical exploration company news flow over the next while.
Okay, great. Great. And I guess another final question, there's always questions about funding and all of that. Mm-hmm. Are you funded for the work program for the work you need to do for this year? When might you need to look to raise more funds?
Again, a great question. And in responding to that, I would say that we're a lot like most exploration and development companies these days, where we're a net consumer of capital, and periodically need to go to market. Our next program is not funded, and we would be looking to raise capital this fall in order to fund that next phase of drilling.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for today. So I'd like to thank Matthew Lennox King for presenting today on Contact Gold, and thanks to everyone on the line for tuning in. Just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back Thursday afternoon when our webinar series continues with Silver Viper presenting September 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for hosting.